All right, all right, all right. We're on episode 62 of the We All Surf podcast, likely our final episode for 2021. And what a year it's been. We've had some awesome conversations, Angel.
We've
We've
had
talked
some
some cool
awesome
people.
adventures. Our lives we don't even recognize our lives from like a year ago, man.
It's true. It's true. It's true. But overall, wrapping up 2021, I know you've made some transitions on your own. You've gone from private practice into the big leagues, and that's after another transition, which we'll talk about with our honored guest here today. A transition from military into the private sector. So, I mean, how you feeling as you wrap up 2021?
I'm feeling really humble. Like I I'm grateful, but and not but and I'm humble and I feel like I need to reach out to people that are near me and close to me and check in on them and see how they're doing and make sure that you never know when a phone call is going to make a difference. So right now is one time I think I would encourage all our listeners, besides to share and like and subscribe to our podcast, to really take a hard look at your friend you have, or shipmate or soldier, brother, battle buddy you haven't talked to in 3 to 4 months, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. The phone call, email you make could make all the difference in the world. So I want to
Yeah.
encourage everyone to do that.
Strong message, and I'm thinking about that a lot today. So we're recording this conversation. I know people are probably listening to this anytime, but recording this conversation end of December 2021, and actually this morning I emceed our RIPTOA ceremony, our Relief in Place Transfer of Authority ceremony, here in Fort Bliss, as we handed off responsibilities for our mission to another unit. As I get ready for my next assignment, and certainly my battle buddies do the same, I said goodbye to a lot of people. And I hate goodbyes. I don't know about you, but I absolutely hate goodbyes. But the reality is that I know in the military, paths cross a lot. And, I'll just
Good and
share
bad.
this good and bad, good and bad, very true. And I know, again, I want to make sure we bring in our guest in a moment because, oh man, this guy has got a lot to share.
If you
I'm
read that
super.
whole damn bio, I will cut you
I knew. I was prepared
because
to
I
make a
know his
joke.
is really long.
It is long. It is long, but well deserved. But I will say this, that I came into the army as at age 29, and I thought that army is going to be all bureaucracy. And trust me, there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of paperwork and a lot of stuff like that. But I thought I'm going to keep my networking and the it's not what you know, it's who you know on the civilian side. That is so far from the truth, man. It is everything about relationships, and I know our guest can share a thing or two about that. And we were just name dropping in our couple of minutes off air of mutual friends, and I know he stayed in touch, and he takes a butt dial occasionally from a mutual friend of ours, and that's just the nature of relationships. So, I mean, man, good message, Angel. Good message, and keep your battle buddies and your friends and your shipmates and so on close, no matter where you're at in life, and they've always got your back, and hopefully you've always got theirs as well.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah, but definitely subscribe, rate, review, and share. So you said that already, and
It
again,
was a subtle slide in. You like that?
it was good. It was smooth, very, very smooth. But that makes it easier for people to find these conversations. But today, I will share this just before I even bring his glorious face on the screen over here. I thought that we had reached the pinnacle of our conversations here on We All Serve, where we talk to amazing leaders, people that have put the uniform on. But frankly, as we always say, it doesn't matter whether you put the uniform on or not. It's a way of life and service. And I thought that we've reached the pinnacle of service, having senior leaders. Whether you're talking about on the officer side of the military, we've had admirals, we've had general officers, but also the retired sergeant major of the Army. But then I met John Wayne Troxell, and here he is on the screen. So I'm because I'm scared of Angel, because the Navy did win the Army Navy game, so I
Oh,
am
did
scared of
they?
it.
I've forgotten. Oh, that's so
Yeah,
funny.
yeah.
Yeah.
I figured I'd bring it out, and I'd just bring that dig in on myself,
What a
and
game, though.
SEAC
Geez, what a
retired John.
game.
Oh,
Ugh.
yeah, yeah. I figured I might as well just bring that in because I know you'd probably rub it into me anyway. But I'd be in trouble if I read this entire 8-page bio over here. But allow me to do just the highlights, because honestly, I can't have the retired Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was the number 3 in what is a relatively new position. In this capacity, he served as the principal advisor to the chairman and the Secretary of Defense on all matters related to the troops of the United States Armed Forces, to include the lethality, readiness, fitness, welfare, and deployability of the force, as well as the joint force development and education. This position made Troxell the most senior enlisted member of the United States Armed Forces. He enlisted way back, I wasn't born yet, in September 1982 as an armored reconnaissance specialist, and graduated from OSIT at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Served in the United States Army for well over 37 years, numerous units, which again, far too numerous, numerous deployments, including 5 combat tours of duty, and has earned literally countless awards and decorations, both from the United States Army, as well as what I loved seeing is actually some of the foreign badges and ribbons that he's earned over the time. But finally, during his time as SEAC, Troxell campaigned for a distinctive rank insignia of the SEAC position, much like the other senior service enlisted advisors. And in 2019, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs approved the new rank and title and pinned that rank on Troxell at a ceremony in the Pentagon. And I've enjoyed looking in preparation for this conversation at some of those pictures of both you pinning on that new rank, as well as your retirement and recognition from the president and senior leaders of this great nation. But with all of those great titles, I know, John, you've been married to the former Sandra Jimenez, your wife of over 38 years. I think that tops your 37 years, from El Paso, Texas. So I've got to get some recommendations on some of the best food and hiking here. But I know you have 3 adult sons, 4 grandchildren, and now you're involved in a lot of consulting, which we'll talk about over the course of this conversation. So retired SEAC John Wayne Troxell, welcome to We All Serve.
Hey, gentlemen, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with both of you.
Oh, honor to have you. And as always, I defer my first question over to my battle buddy over here, who did win that Army-Navy game.
Not personally. Hey, John, thanks for coming on. And I wanted to start off just with, and I dog out Shalom for reading the Bible, but it really always gets my mind going about things that I want to talk about and things I want to ask. And it mentioned, you mentioned you do some consulting. What kind of consulting, and how was the transition from obviously consulting the 4-star and consulting in business is a different, there's a different vernacular, there's a different methodology. How did you make that transition, and what is that like? Or did you stay in your swim lane to say, hey, I'm just really, really good at this?
Yeah, Angel, thanks for the question. So I have my own consulting company, which is PME Hard Consulting. PME Hard means physically, mentally, and emotionally hard. It's a phrase I coined during the surge in Iraq on how our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines needed to be to fight and win against an insidious enemy that was using all kinds of tactics to not only cause harm on us, but innocent civilians and things like that. And so I just kept that phrase, and I named my consulting company, and I basically consult on leadership, human performance, and building organizational cohesion. And right now, I either serve as a consultant, strategic advisor, or brand ambassador for 7 different companies. And I will tell you, when I got ready to retire, and I started going into the corporate world, I thought I might have to change how I approach, because, the military, as you all were talking in the dialogue, there's bureaucracy associated with it and everything. But what I realized is that big business and the military have so many similarities. So on any given day with some of these companies, I'm being asked to kind of do the same things I did as the SEAC, which is provide best advice, to tell the CEO that the emperor doesn't have any clothes on when they're not doing things that they need to do or whatever, and get the pulse of the organization, and ultimately deliver the why to the people throughout the organization on the vision, priorities, and focus of the leadership of the company. So I initially thought I was going to have to change how I approach things in business, but I'm kind of keeping the same leadership style now and focus that I had for almost 38 years in the military.
Yeah.
Well, you're lucky. I'm in this end of it, and I'm like, what the heck? I wish, and there's a difference. When I had my own consulting company, it was a lot like what you're saying, talking about leadership, talking about retention, talking about how to bring
Yeah.
veterans in, how to create a good culture, a good climate. What does it look like? Succession planning, how to develop them, young,
Yeah.
early, things that we learn and things that gel with us. And you go to a different aspect of consulting, and it's totally different. So what you're saying makes perfect sense to me.
Now, I will tell you, it hasn't all been beer and Skittles out here. One company, it was a Hollywood film company that I worked for about 6 months right after I retired. The hierarchy of that film company, what I was trying to do was get them to make their films on the military look authentic, and that caused a lot of attention to detail, and they weren't a lot of fans of someone telling them that they weren't doing things right. And so our relationship didn't last very long,
Yeah.
because the boss basically, was going to do what they wanted to anyways. And I just thought, well, why do you got me? If I'm telling you, 38 years tells me that you're going to make this look inauthentic, and the troops are going to see that it looks like garbage, and you're not going to get some good ratings out of this documentary movie you're trying to make. So we did part ways after about 6 months, but it was all for the best.
Yeah, I think it's about what you're saying. It's really about value alignment with the client and consultants. And one of my mentors here at my firm said, Angel, you know what? People have different values than you. People have different emphasis than you. Some people just aren't fans of the military, and that's okay. They just don't know any better, and that's fine, and that's okay. You
Yeah.
fought for them to have the right to be like that. So I think the key is, and what my takeaway, and it's probably your takeaway too, was early on, do the litmus test, find out where their heads are, and if they're
Yeah.
authentic and sincere, you're good to go. If you're not, well, now you know. You just saved yourself, even though the money might be there, you saved yourself about 6 months of heartache.
Yeah, absolutely. You're exactly right.
Shalom?
So yeah, so I mean, listening to this and talking about how that how you've managed to build your identity, and I've just been reading. Part of that identity has certainly not been completely stepping away from the hats that you've worn. I
Right.
noticed the other day you spoke virtually to a course at Fort Benning, Georgia. I know that recently you visited at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. So certainly you've kept that relationship. You don't spend 37 years reaching the highest enlisted role, and just sort of run away from it. But as Angel and I always do, he always talks about the current when we start this conversation. I'm going to bring you all the way back to what I believe now would be about 39, 40 years ago, when you went to OSIT, Fort Knox, and what was it that brought you into the military? What crazy idea brought you into a recruiter's office that many years ago? And I mean, tell us a little bit about your family, and were they supportive at the time?
Yeah, so I grew up in Davenport, Iowa, Quad Cities, USA, and um, I didn't have a lot of purpose, motivation, and direction as I was growing up. I mean, I had sports in my life, with wrestling and stuff like that, and football. And I grew up in a loving household, even though at times we were a broken home. For the most part, my stepfather raised me. I had three siblings in the house with me, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I didn't have a lot of direction. And my brother, that's a year older than me, he joined the military, and then several other of the older kids his age and others joined the military. And I saw when they came back, whether it was from Army boot camp, Navy boot camp, or Marine Corps boot camp, they were different when they came back. They were kind of sinewy, muscular. They walked with their head up and their shoulders back. They were boisterous, and there was a level of confidence about them, and
They
and
had
there was an
money.
air about that. And they had money too. Beyond the $5 a week allowance we would get. So and I said I want some of that. So I joined the military, and once I joined and left. that's what got me into the recruiter's office, and what got me to join, and especially as a reconnaissance specialist in the Army, was the recruiter I had. And I joined, and what I realized in a hurry is that I just kind of fit in with the military like one of those round pegs in a round hole. I just fit. And shortly after I got to my first duty station at Fort Bliss, I met this little short, beautiful Hispanic girl named Sandra Jimenez, and we started dating on the 1st of February, 83, and we got married on the 9th of September, 83. We had our first child in March of 84, and we've been together for over 38 years. And so what got me into the military, yeah, we weren't married when when he was conceived. All right. But hey, I was a young Joe,
young Joe.
My story too, whatever. I get it. It's just funny. It's just something you gotta you hang out. That's what the podcast is. We're a bunch of guys and we're hanging out giving shit like we give the guys.
Oh yeah. So but the key thing about staying in the military is now I had responsibility. I had a wife, I had a son on the way, and that's what kind of kept me in. And my first re-enlistment took me to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I joined the 82nd Airborne Division, and I had found my calling. And that's kind of where my career took off there. It's where I got my baptism by fire in combat and Operation Just Cause. Yesterday was the 32nd anniversary of jumping in there. And then Desert Storm after that. And my career just kind of took off. So it all started with trying to emulate the older kids and my brother in my neighborhood. And then after that, it was about taking care of my family. And ultimately, it was about striving for excellence and trying to reach, that untapped potential that kept me going throughout my career.
Incredible. And I asked this of all of our listeners, or of all of our guests rather, and it's particularly meaningful coming from you after reaching every enlisted rank in the Army and then beyond, which we'll talk about that joint side of things. But can you point to sort of best friend or greatest mentor from across your 37 plus years?
Well, there's so many, but I would say the ultimate and probably the one that had the most impact on me was retired Command Sergeant Major Roger Blackwood. Roger, when I first got to the 82nd Airborne Division, was in a critical role in our light armor battalion. He was a master gunner. So he kind of taught me the skills of gunnery and how to fire the weapon system on our armored reconnaissance vehicles and everything. And then a couple of years later, he was my first sergeant when I was a platoon sergeant in his company there. And we were very close. And then the last time we served together, I was a Stryker Brigade Sergeant Major, Surge Brigade number 4 in Iraq. And he was my division Sergeant Major out of the 1st Armored Division. And we've stayed in touch since. But he, by far, had the most impact. But then, when I first joined, and, I only stayed at Fort Bliss a year, and I was PCS to Germany. And I got there, and my first sergeant there was a guy named Charles B. DeRosa, who was a Korean War vet and a Vietnam vet. And he was the guy that kind of focused me on, you got to be tough and you got to be focused. And he was actually, the first guy to tell me that he saw potential in me and that I could one day be a first sergeant like him or beyond. And he was a guy that I was just driven to. And then ultimately, when you need mentorship at every level, the pinnacle of my career was for 2 years as the SEAC. Well, actually, for 45 months, my immediate boss was Marine General Joe Dunford, just the consummate statesman and probably the best officer I've ever served with. And then I would have to throw Army General Mike Scaparrotti in there, who retired as the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, but I served as his Command Sergeant Major in 3 different assignments, to include a year in combat in Afghanistan. And then for 2 years while I was working for Dunford, I also advised Secretary Jim Mattis. So working for Dunford and Mattis at the same time was just nirvana for me. And at that level, the strategic level where you get to understand the direction that the SecDef and the chairman are taking our military, and you're able to deliver that to the troops in the form of why we need you to do something. I think, though, I can't talk about mentors without having them in there as well.
Amazing.
One of the things that I got to do when I was enlisted was I got to go to Senior Enlisted Academy. I had my whole career planned out to be a command master chief. Went to Naval War College, and that's kind of where I figured out.
Right?
Right, yeah, in January, so I can freeze my tail off. It was nice. and then I got commissioned 2 years later. Know when they sent me back there? In January. It's nice. It's great. Thanks. Welcome back, guys. But the one thing I learned was the Senior Enlisted Advisors, and we had a couple, command master. We had Master Chief Hurt of Hurt Consulting, who has all the Navy contracts and all that educating CNET and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, got it. I know your bread is butter, buddy. And I understood that what they did was they developed their force and their fleet master chiefs, which I think is pretty much the same kind of structure.
Sure.
But I think that they advised the CNO and their branch commanders as well on issues of uniform items. Does this make sense? PRT, and had buy-in on those quality of life ombudsman kind of things.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they went around and did the grip and grin and supported the troops. But what percentage of that was actually interacting with and making policy and assisting in policy development with the likes of Dunford and Mattis? Because that's fascinating to me, and it would make me jealous as hell.
Yeah. So
it's a pretty cool job. I mean, you go along. I'm like, yeah, this is great.
I'll tell you what, it was exciting to get up and go to work every day. Yeah. But so to understand the role of the chairman and the Secretary of Defense, the chairman is not in any chain of command. The chairman is a principal military advisor to the SecDef and the president. More importantly, to the president of the United States. He is the president's military advisor. The Secretary of Defense obviously is in the chain of command and is an advisor to the president as well, but on all defense-related matters. And so in terms of Title 10 kind of policy and stuff, those are what the services kind of do. And the SecDef, along with the service secretaries, that's kind of their direction. But in terms of strategy, whether it's the national military strategy or the national defense strategy, or emerging kind of things that would include the entire force, like transgender integration or anything like that, I certainly had a role in that in terms of advising. But I will tell you, the best part out of it all, and what I saw as my biggest responsibility, is that when I got into a conference room with Mattis and Dunford and the entire joint staff, all these 3-stars, as well as the key players from the Office of the Secretary of Defense, I knew in that meeting, being the only enlisted guy, that I represented every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Guardian, and in some cases, a Coast Guardsman in the entire active Guard and Reserve force. So I had to make sure that I came prepared for the conversations we were going to have. And I had to make sure that I gave feedback, because the chairman and the SecDef were going to call on me, that was relevant to the conversation we were having. What I mean by that is when you get to that level, at the strategic level, you're not going to have a conversation about, the tactical level stuff that gets after good order and discipline, kind of the ombudsman kind of stuff you talked about, sure. Angel. Don't get me wrong, that stuff's important and you still have a role in that as the SEAC, but now you're at the strategic level and you have to give feedback or recommendations that will be relevant to those kinds of strategic conversations. So what this forced me to do was to study all the time, to continue to grow all the time and learn what we were doing across the globe. What were the services doing in terms of building capability that can be employed by the combatant commanders? And then what were the combatant commanders' campaign plans to get after their areas of responsibility? So every night I was taking home not only a zipper bag, but reading materials that would continue to keep me abreast of everything that was going on. And then as we all know, as a senior enlisted guy, one of your key jobs is to stay out in front of your bosses. They shouldn't have to be going behind themselves to try and pull you in. You ought to be trying to get out in front of them so that you're ahead of the conversations or the events that are going on and stuff like that. So all the stuff you talked about still happens at that level. But for me, it was more what could I provide for the chairman and SecDef that they may not get ordinarily. So for instance, I was their eyes and ears. So over the course of the 4 years that I was in that job, I visited over 70 countries and repeat offenders of Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Yemen, all these places we had troops in bad areas and in combat areas that I could give real-time information to both of them. Not that we were trying to circumvent any chain of command at all, but if the Secretary of Defense wanted to know how we were doing in Mogadishu, Somalia, on the ground, I could get in there quite easily, a lot more than he could, or even the chairman, because there's going to be a dog and pony show coming with him, as you all know.
We call it going through the deck plates.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what Mattis used to say. I need you to get to the deck plate. And so whether it was on the deck plate of a ship or whether it was on the ground in Somalia, whether it was at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, or if it was in Johnston Atoll in the Pacific, I made it a point to get to where the troops were, to get the pulse of the force for the chairman and the SecDef, and to deliver the why to the troops, why they're there, why they're doing what they're doing, and how long we need them to do it.
You really did a great. You really painted a great picture, because I was struggling initially, and I'm like, okay, is as a senior enlisted representing all the soldier and all the enlisted in the military? Is he strategic? And you really connected it. Say, yes, I have access to this, and yes, I have the street cred, if you will, to go there and get the straight skinny without the roses and the dog and pony show. And you know what? And yeah, I'm going to advise based on, hey, by the way, here's how it affects sailors and soldiers. Here's what they're going to feel about that. Here's how it's going to impact them in a way that senior leaders really might not have that insight.
Yeah. So Angel, you'll appreciate this. So one of the first trips I had to make was onto the USS George Washington. And so when I came on deck, I saluted, and they, went through the process of letting me on board. The commanding officer met me. He said, "Hey, I just want to let you know you got an all hands call here in about 30 minutes with this entire crew here." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And he said, "Well, it's about 5,000 sailors and about 1,000 Marines." So here I am, a guy that spent 35 years at that time in the Army, wearing an Army uniform, and I'm getting ready to talk to a bunch of 5,000 sailors and 1,000 Marines. And then, oh, by the way, up on the stage down there in the hangar bay, they got the big United States Navy flag back there and the American flag. So I had to deliver a message that was relevant to those sailors and those Marines. And it could not be in Army acronyms. It could not be in Army vernacular. It had to be something that they could walk away and say, okay, this guy might be, and it would resonate. Yes, sir. So, even though I'm in an Army uniform, I had to be able to speak their language. So so in that job, I had to do a lot of listening. So when I would go into an engine room of a destroyer or something, I would sit around and soak it in. I'd go to the chief's mess and listen to what was going on. I would dine with the young sailors, or I would, go to the commander's quarters and listen to the strategy and the vision that commanding officer would have and everything. And so when we talk about how to be best informed, doing a lot of listening and learning goes a long way. And even if you're the senior enlisted guy in the Department of Defense, when you show up somewhere, regardless of where it's at, people expect you to deliver a message, and as you said, would resonate with them, even though you're in a different uniform with a different culture. So through sets and repetitions and constant studying, and then my relationships with the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and the other guys, I kind of built this. So when I first got there, it was Mike Stevens. Then it became Steve Giordano, and ultimately it was Russ Smith. So, and that goes the other thing. So when you're trying to get educated and you're trying to learn and you're trying to understand, you have to build a network too. And I know, Shalom, we were going to talk about this, but I'll jump into it right now. At that
Please.
level, the SEAC has a Defense Senior Enlisted Leader Council, which a lot of people don't know about. But it's all of the service senior enlisted, so the MCPON, Sergeant Major of the Army, and all the other guys. And it's all the combatant command senior enlisted. And these are the top 20 enlisted in the entire Department of Defense. And so I would build a network with them. And then based on what are the key issues, service related or operationally, we would look to solve those kinds of problems. Also, we brought in our foreign partners from all over the globe. We built this global network of senior enlisted that could share best practices, that could assist one another. And ultimately, just about 2 years ago, when I stepped out as the SEAC, for my last DCEL conference, we had over 40 international partners that showed up, either the senior enlisted from that nation or one of their service senior enlisted. So I think in that role, you've got to be a learning leader. You've got to be able to understand strategically what's going on and how to translate that at the tactical level so the troops understand why we're doing what we're doing. And then you have to continue to practice that art of engagement and influence by, constantly dialoguing with congressional members, with the State Department, with administration members, and then obviously with the troops. And so for me, it was a 4-year university that I was going to called the University of the SEAC, and trying to just make myself better. Because the position was so new, I also wanted to make sure that we were given the job irreversible momentum, and the troops wouldn't have to ask, why do we need a guy at the joint level when we got our service senior enlisted and everything. And that's what I tried to do. And it worked out well for 4 years. And now the current SEAC, he's an Air Force guy, Ramon CZ Colon Lopez. He's carrying the baton further, and he's doing great things in the role as well.
I love hearing about the joint side of things. It's fascinating, and I love the story that you just shared. And I was going to go there, so you took the words right out of my mouth in terms of wearing that Army uniform, but then being able to be the brand ambassador, if you will, for everybody.
Absolutely.
But I have to ask, because this is a leadership podcast, and again, I know I'm watching some of the comments come in, which is great. I know we've got folks that are in uniform tuning in. We're going to talk about our other audience, which is folks perhaps that might be interested in coming in uniform in a moment. But I just want to talk about the general leadership piece for a moment. And I'm really hesitating in asking this question, but I feel comfortable. So what the hell, why not? So, John, you reached, again, senior enlisted position in DOD. A position like that doesn't just come to you. A position like that, and you mentioned your motivation, those people that have propelled you along your journey. For anybody that might be tuning in, how much do you believe is appropriate, whether it's in military or in business, to self-advocate, to push yourself along to the next position, and to essentially self-promote? Because I'll be honest, I look at the things that you're doing, and I think it's awesome that you clearly understand marketing. You clearly understand how to get a message out there. So again, a bit of a touchy subject, but I want to understand the behind the scenes of what it takes to get to that point.
So I think first and foremost, it's not to worry about what the next job is or trying to get promoted or anything. It's how do you make yourself the best at what you're doing right now, and how do you have the biggest impact? What gave me the most joy throughout my career as a leader was seeing the people that I was responsible for excel, and seeing those around me that were reaching their untapped potential and were, going on and doing great things. That gave me more joy than John Wayne Troxell getting a promotion or anything. Don't get me wrong. All of us want upward mobility. All of us want to continue to get increased responsibility. But for me, it was, how do I impact the people around me? And so I learned at an early age, that that if you want to have an impact as a leader, you got to be more about the intangibles than anything tangible. You know, I talk all the time. Yeah, I was an airborne ranger. I was a master parachutist. I had a combat jump and all this stuff. But those kind of tangibles could not define me as a leader. It had to be, was I genuine in my approach? Was I transparent in my demeanor? Did I have a good balance between discipline and compassion? And was I doing things to be inspirational and provide that purpose, motivation, and direction, and get people excited to come to work every day and want to do their job and want to be better? And do I embrace the diversity of our organization and leverage everyone and treat them with dignity and respect and build this cohesive team? And I just kind of stayed focused on that. And I think the more we have people that focus on that kind of stuff, they're going to be successful leaders. And ultimately, those promotions or positions of increased responsibility will come in. But I don't think, obviously, selfless service is something that we all do and we have to do. But I think at no time should it be, hey, I'm focusing on this next promotion. Now, don't get me wrong. If we aren't doing things to make ourselves look good or to make ourselves look effective or be effective, that certainly we could get lost in the wash and pretty soon get passed over and stuff like that. So there's got to be a little bit of that in there. And I say this all the time, it's not a sin to desire to be for positions of higher responsibility or for glory or anything, as long as you're taking the team with you and getting them to their goals and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I tried to do. And especially as the SEAC, I wanted the forces to know who I was and what I did. And I wanted them to know that I was their voice with the chairman, the SecDef, and at the White House.
John, I'm going to ask. I just have one. That was awesome. I just have one last thing. And what you were saying about the leadership piece, I think about as I go day for day, and someone asks you, "Hey, Angel, what are you good at?" And last week, someone in my firm asked, "What are you good at?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm good at leading. I'm developing people." Da, 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 da. No. But what are you good at? And they go, the tactical microscopic. And I'm like, but I'm here.
Yeah.
Like, no, we need you to be here. I'm like, no, I'm here. Like, no, we need you to be here. So it's kind of hard. Like your example about jumping out of planes. I'm like, I'm not thinking about jumping out of planes or doing the tactical stuff. I'm thinking about the real gratification, and same for you. The real gratification comes from the unit level stuff and the pushing people and watching attrition rates go down and watching advancement rates go through the roof and all those kind of things that are tangibles in companies now. One thing I was wondering is my chief way back in the day on the GW, actually, on the George Washington, we're there responding to 9/11. I told Shalom about that.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, and I was doing really well in my career. And he said, I just want to let you know, when you're out there running in front and you're doing all the right things, you're in front, and that makes you a target, and that makes people hate you, and they will naturally have animosity towards you all the way through. And I can imagine that through the senior enlisted ranks, crabs in a barrel sometimes. It just is. And I wonder, and when you get out, it's a lot of the same in the veteran community and the corporate community. What do you do? What are some things you do to mitigate that? Because we're people and we're sensitive. And if you tell me, oh, it doesn't bother me, I'm gonna go, yeah, right. It bothers all of us. I mean, I think we're all but how we fix it and how we address it, I like to know some of the tools and some things you do to kind of validate yourself and say, you know what, I'm trekking along just fine.
Yeah, one of the things that, and Angel, that's a great question, man, because in the military and in business, a lot of people don't like to talk about this stuff. And I label it professional jealousy that exists in any walk of life, what we do. But General Dunford, when he first hired me, he said a couple things to me. He said, one, if you're waiting around for me to tell you what to do, you're going to be waiting for 4 years because I expect you to know what to do. And so I knew that all I had to do was arm myself with his vision and priorities and then get out and get after business. But two, he said, don't expect me to come by and tell you you're doing a great job. He says, I'll know you're doing a great job by what the troops are telling me. And so, periodically he would give me that feedback that the troops love, when I'm coming and talking and everything. But obviously this kind of stuff exists, that this professional jealousy and everything. And there's always going to be people that are going to criticize you. But I put it like this, especially now in business. Stephen Covey, a guy that did a great job in producing leaders and cohesive organizations. He
He's a
kind of
1 minute
talked about
manager guy, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. He talked about the three circles of relationships, or the three circles of getting better. And then the inner circle was the circle of control. Everything that was in your direct control, whether it was people that work for you, your family, your job, whatever it is, people that you had to focus on that. And then the next circle out is your circle of influence. And it's people that you have to build relationships with, and that, you have to continue to kind of work with them to move forward, or other organizations to move forward. And the outer circle is circle of concern. It might be those people that kind of piss you off, or those that will say something that, kind of have an impact on you. And he said, though the people in the circle of concern, you need to punt. And the situations in the circle of concern, you need to punt, because they have no impact on what you control or what you influence. And so what I've tried to do is take an extinction response to the naysayers to me. And I just don't answer them. I don't say anything to them. Obviously, when people are talking smack about you, in your mind, your initial thought is, we can all be some fighting MFers here tonight, and everything, But
you're pretty bad from behind that keyboard, aren't you?
Yeah.
You
Well,
tough keystroking son of a gun, you.
Yeah. Well, and I did a video about that, a keyboard tough guy shithead, excuse my language, but the point is, what I've learned, and I really learned this the further I went up in rank, is let the people say what they're going to say, and try to let it roll off your back. Obviously, it has an impact and everything. So I feel like I've gotten better, and especially now in my life, because I spend a lot of time with our active duty, for our Guard and Reserve right now. Every week, it seems like I'm visiting some soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, Space Guardians, or whoever. And so I'm having a huge impact. And now there's people that look at this like, well, this guy's retired. What's he going out and talking to the troops? I said, look, they're asking me to come out. I'm going to
You
give
have
back.
something to give. You have
Yeah.
something valuable to give. If they want a better service, what you bring is going to make the service better. Those lessons and everything that's encapsulated in you,
Yeah.
that you don't want that shit to be lost, because that's some valuable stuff learned the hard way.
Yeah. And so I will tell you, if I learned anything, and to answer your question, when I was the SEAC, I had a guy that instantly jealous of what I was doing. He was one of my subordinates. He was a fellow E9. He had over 30 years in the military, and he was a 60%er, if you know what I mean by that. He was a minimum standard kind of operator, and he expected to be rewarded for minimum standards. And so I had to get in his butt a couple of times behind closed doors. And what I didn't realize, because I was so busy as the SEAC, and I couldn't focus on my inner office because I had 3 million active Guard and Reserve troops to worry about. And I kind of took my eye off the ball with this guy. And little did I realize that this guy was trying to build a case to get me fired. And so anytime I used a cuss word, anytime I had a slight inflection in my voice talking to him, or anything like that, he was writing down. And all of a sudden, I had an IG complaint filed against me. And at that level, I got suspended, and I was suspended for 6 months as the SEAC pending an investigation. And when it all was said and done, I was reinstated by General Dunford. But that was the six months of the hardest part of my life, because people kept telling me, just retire, let it go. But I was like, I'm not going to go out like this. I knew that I had not done anything wrong as a leader, and what I was being accused of was a bunch of BS. And in the end, the IG found a couple of things that I had done wrong General Dunford gave me a counseling statement, and I was reinstated. And I will tell you, gentlemen, when I went back into that job, I was not going to change my leadership style at all. I had been a sergeant major for 20 years. And now in my 20th year, you're telling me that I'm screwed up. So I went back. But what I did learn, and my lesson from it was, I took my eye off of my circle of control in my internal environment, and I wasn't paying enough attention, and I wasn't cognizant enough of what was going around me in my immediate office. And so that guy, his trick failed, and he was sent on his way. I was put back in the job, and the team and I got back after business. But my point in all of that is, and my message to leaders out there, be cognizant of your environment at all times. Don't try to change your leadership style to be popular. Certainly don't try to change it to be a hard ass, because if you do that, you're going down the road of being toxic. Be the leader that has made you successful through your years of either in service or business, but just be cognizant of the people around you and in your environment at all times.
John, thank you for your transparency and your honesty, man. I'm so, that's so refreshing. And the one thing that I take away from this is and that I learned about a year and a half, 2 years ago, is creating a professional personal board of directors, right? People
Yeah,
that are advising you and counseling you and watching your back when you're, and just fostering those relationships, those important relationships, and just surround yourself with those people so you don't always have to be looking left and right, and you can just keep your eye on the prize.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate the candor as well, and some really great advice that's relevant for those in service, frankly, in business, and really in any way. So, just as we come to close in our conversation, I want to give the final word over to you. I know you're involved in some great things, and but if you can certainly share where people can learn and what you want people to learn more about from you. But if we could start that answer by sharing just what's your message to the young John Wayne Troxells that might be out there, might be considering serving. I mean, go Army for sure. I mean, no question about that. But but tell us your message to anybody that might be tuning in.
So I will tell you, the United States military took a guy like me who graduated about 650 out of 725. I was a good student during wrestling season and stuff like that, but outside of that, I was more focused on girls and drinking beer. And I didn't apply myself. I didn't have a lot of options when I graduated from high school. I took a chance on joining the military based off of seeing what it did to the people, the older kids in my neighborhood and my older brother. And when I came in, I barely a graduate of high school, no purpose, motivation, and direction. And over the course of 37 years, 10 months, and 29 days, I was able to serve my country in combat 5 times. I earned a master's degree in a concentration in strategic leadership, and I rose to the ultimate senior enlisted position in the DoD. And it was all based on these tenets. I think you have to dream big. What do you want to do with your life? Dream big, okay? But you have to set lofty and attainable goals. You can't, if you're a JV football player in high school, you can't say, I want to be an NFL player, all right? Because if you can't even make varsity on your high school, chances are you're not going to get a Division I scholarship, and you're not going to play in the NFL. So dream big, but set lofty and attainable goals. Visualize yourself attaining those goals, and then ultimately you got to actualize it. And there's going to be a lot of naysayers. There's going to be a lot of bumps in the road and everything, but you got to take it and you got to keep trucking on to get to where you want to be. And so that's kind of what I focused on throughout my career and what I do now. I opened my own consulting company, and now my consulting company pays the bills, but I also own the eTool Nation Foundation now. And if you know anything about the eTool Nation and what it's related to Troxell. So, okay, a couple of years ago when I was the SEAC, I'd seen how, this was my first year in the job. I had seen how in some parts of Washington, D.C., we weren't looking at the hard sacrifices that our men and women in the military were making in such places like Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Yemen, Colombia, and these other places, or in the South China Sea, like our sailors were doing, performing freedom of navigation operations and things like that. And all of a sudden, this kind of stuff was in the back burner of, kind of what we were focusing on. It was almost that in some cases, depending on who you're talking to, that we weren't even a nation at war anymore. And so I wanted to make sure we kept the men and women in harm's way at the forefront. And so I kind of called out ISIS one time. Secretary Mattis came in and said, hey, we're not going to just talking about defeating the enemies of our country. We're going to annihilate them. And so when he and I would do town halls together, I knew I had to send a message that would resonate with the troops. And so when he would talk national defense strategy and talk about competition and responding to crisis and all that, I focused on fighting and winning. And then my message, one day I just said to a bunch of Marines we were talking to in Camp Lejeune, and I said, what the SecDef means is that people like ISIS have two options. They can surrender or die. If they surrender, we are a peace-loving nation, and we'll treat them humanely. We'll deliver them to their detainee holding facility cell, give them food, shelter, and ultimately due process. But let there be no doubt, if they don't surrender, then we're going to kill them with extreme prejudice, whether that means dropping bombs on them, shooting them in the face, or if need be, beating them to death with our entrenching tools, our military shovels. And I said that just to inspire the troops, because I think as a military leader, your job is to inspire the troops and intimidate the enemy.
You knew your audience, that's for sure. Talking to a bunch of Marines, yeah, that's about right.
Well, I will tell you though, this thing went viral, and all of a sudden, oh yes, a Washington Post reporter heard me say this, and he started telling me that I was telling troops to go out and commit war crimes and things, and he was going to post an article in the Washington Post. And my public affairs guy by the name of Rob Couture, retired Master Sergeant now, he said, let's beat him to the punch. So we took my quote, put a picture of me holding an entrenching tool with that quote on social media, and it went viral. And it got picked up by all news networks. Obviously, Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, and those criticized me. Fox News and One News Network really, praised me. Some members of Congress praised me. Some criticized me. The troops loved it. And even the foreign media like France, Germany, Belgium, countries like that picked it up. And so the e-tool all of a sudden, and this, what's ironic, Angel, based on your statement about Marines, the first person that brought me a military shovel to sign, an entrenching tool, was a sailor. And he happened to be the chairman's mass communicator. And so I was like, where in the heck did you get this? Because I know you don't get issued this. He said, oh, I got my ways. And so since then, I've signed over 2,000. As a matter of fact, I'm over 2,050 entrenching tools. I have an E-Tool Nation Facebook page that has 2,200 members in it. And what E-Tool Nation now is like-minded people that are about living the warrior ethos, that love their country, love their freedom, their way of life and everything. But for me now, PME Hard pays the bills so I could fund the E-Tool Nation. And now E-Tool Nation, I have an apparel line of shirts and hoodies and hats and all this stuff. And every cent that we get back from it, I donate to some kind of charity. As a matter of fact,
Shalom, can we get the website on the screen on the banner, please?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. No, we'll get it up there.
And so, for instance, I was in Iowa, and there's an organization, Downrange Excursions, that takes veterans and military members, law enforcement members that suffer from PTSD on exotic hunting trips to Alaska and fishing trips. The Lighthouse for the Blind is another one, and so many others that I want to give back to. So my website is www.pmehard.com. That's my official page for my consulting company, but it also has the page for the E-Tool Nation apparel and everything. And then you can find me on all forms of social media. And the E-Tool Nation page is on Facebook. Please come and join us. And we don't allow a lot of political stuff that goes on there, but I try to keep people informed of what's going on in our world. I encourage discussions on either side of what may be going on in the world. But in the end, it's about being better informed, better prepared, and also just, being excited about who you are and what you are. And so now I'm so excited. And another announcement, I am now PME Hard and eTool Nation is sponsoring 2 veteran soldier athletes. One is a veteran and a military spouse. So she is a world record holder, power lifter, and strong woman. And she's competing in the world championships, the national championships in July in New Hampshire. And we just signed an NCO on active duty who's a professional MMA fighter. He has a big fight coming up on 15 January. So we sponsor both of those 2 athletes and assist them with their training, their training fees and all this and all this stuff. So my whole goal with eTool Nation is to give back. And so that's what my wife and we run the company now, and, giving away money so that people can do it. But as you know, especially you, Angel, you just don't wake up one morning and say you're going to start writing checks. You got to have a way to bring revenue in, and then you got to have a way to get that revenue to the right people, and then you got to be able to show it to the IRS that what
and you got to make sure they're the right people in the first place.
Absolutely. So that's what I'm passionate about now, and that's what I'm focusing on. But ultimately, it's to give back to an institution that gave me and my family so much over almost 38 years, and to support our veteran community, our law enforcement, and our first responders, and our military family members. And that's what I'm focused on now. And we're going to keep getting after it. We're going to keep getting better, and we're going to keep dreaming big and setting those lofty, attainable goals, visualizing them, and we're going to actualize them, and we're going to keep doing good.
I think you're going to actualize yourself into a goal that you haven't even set. You already did it once. There's no way you were thinking, hey, I'm going to be the chairman, joint chiefs of staff, a senior enlisted advisor, because that job didn't exist. You actualized yourself into a role that they had to create for you. So then now you're going to actualize yourself into a multinational conglomerate. Okay, got it. Okay.
Well, this is one of the things I'm focused on, I consider myself an entrepreneur. And as you all know, there's very few senior enlisted out there that are entrepreneurs that have started their own business and everything. And there's a lot of, criticism that comes with that, because I'm not a gate guard at, Norfolk Naval Base or on Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington or something, that I'm still striving for excellence in what I'm doing. And so now not only am I trying to build my own company into something that a lot of enlisted don't do, but I'm also trying to assist other enlisted that are looking to be business owners themselves. And I'm using the hashtag corporate enlisted takeover, because one thing I've learned about working around people like Dan Daly, the Sergeant Major of the Army, or Russ Smith, the MCPON, and others out there, is that when it comes to corporate business and everything, we can compete with the officers of the world. And that's not bashing officers or anything, but normally, the stigma is that only senior officers, flag or general, can get out and go do great things in the business world. And I want to show them that, guys like me and guys like Dan Daly and others, that we can get out and do it as well. And so if there's anybody out there, I would say join my network on LinkedIn. And if you're a veteran out there, because I do a lot with Veterans Affairs, and if you're having struggles with your disability compensation claim, or you're getting ready to transition, you need assistance, reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to help. And please join the eTool Nation, because we're all about, supporting and helping each other as well. So, gentlemen, thanks again to both of you. Appreciate your service. And I'm excited to see a soldier and a sailor doing a podcast together. That does my joint heart proud.
We're all purple up in here.
Oh yeah.
That's right.
Oh
There
yeah.
you go.
Oh yeah, no, thank you so much. Again, retired SEAC, John Wayne Troxell. Thank you so much. And as I said before, I look forward to advocating for all that you are doing. And I meant what I said. I think it's awesome that you're leaning forward really hard to make a difference on behalf of all that you've done over the past 4+ decades. So thank you. And I know you work with your amazing wife Sandra and your son Brian, and bit of a
Absolutely.
family effort. So thanks to both of them for supporting you, both as you've served and as we always say on this podcast, we all serve and we all continue to serve.
Absolutely.
So you're doing it, and definitely. So again, subscribe, rate, review, and share. We'll certainly we've got a great library of some great conversations, much like our conversation today. And to my friend, my brother Angel, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, my friend.
Absolutely. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And we'll see you back here real soon. Have a good evening, everybody. Take care. Bye.